Уважаемые гости, участники,
Dear guests, dear participants, welcome to the academic BRICS Forum here in Moscow. Today we have a video recorded by Sergei Lavrov, a diplomat who has done a lot for the world, Russia, and he was one of the people who was there from the very start of BRICS. So he recorded a video address for us, and I would like to express my gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the support. So video, please. Dear colleagues, friends, I'm happy to welcome you to the 12th Academic Forum amongst BRICS countries. The mechanism of regular consultations in academic circles was launched in 2008, and back then in Moscow, based on the Russian initiative, the first meeting took place. In line with the Delhi Declaration of 2012, the Council of Expert Centers of BRICS has made it official, the national coordination. And I'm happy to state that over the recent years, BRICS has become a reliable and very important platform. We managed to establish a lot of contacts among expert business, scientific and student circles and communities. We have addressed a lot of issues related to information and education. During this meeting, we are going to discuss a lot of burning issues important for global development. It's not possible to underestimate the importance of such discussions. Pandemic has proved that some threats are common for all of us, and we can conquer these challenges only if we join forces and work together with the Organization of United Nations, acting as a coordinator. Unfortunately, not everybody share this approach. We can see that some nations, such as the United States, do not want to establish dialogue with other participants. They are doing quite the opposite. They're trying to punish those who are doing something on their own, trying to make the world better. And as an alternative to the international law, are promoting the concept of a new world order with rules. And it's a small group of countries that imposes their rules. And there are a lot of concerns. Protectionism is gaining pace. There are some contradictions in trade. There are some one-way sanctions that are imposed. But this is not a good tool. All of this leads to more confrontation and leads to lack of mutual trust. That's why we need to build a dialogue which would adopt global and regional agenda. Our cooperation within the framework of BRICS is a good example that such joint work is doable, it's possible. In the year of 75th anniversary of the World Organization, it is important to voice our position, the position of our 5 countries, and tell the world that we want a fair, democratic, multipolar world, and we want to comply with the UN Charter. From the 1st of January of this year, Russia has been chairing BRICS, and in his address during summit in Brazil last November, President Putin has stressed that our main objective during our chairmanship would be a strategic partnership with other countries and improve standards and quality of life of our peoples. We really hope that you will have fruitful discussions. There will be plenty of proposals and ideas that will be included in the final document submitted for the heads of states meeting in November. I wish you every success. Have a fruitful forum. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Minister Lavrov. And we just heard that our recommendations will be included in the final document. And this is a great message. This is great news. And it's an impetus for us. That's why we need to be more active, and we need to do everything possible to make this forum successful.
Now I'd like to give the floor to His Excellency Dr. Gunbal Basanjab, who is the head of the Sub-Regional Office for East and Northeast Asia, UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, who works extensively to make the word sustainable development come true, and who promotes UN principles as his work and also as part of his personal commitment. I'm also happy to say that he's sharing same alma mater with me and with a number of people in this auditorium, and I would like to ask to give his word in for today's meeting. Your Excellency.
Dear Minister Lavrov, dear Mr. Fratkov, Director of the Russian Institute for Strategic Studies, dear Victoria, the Director of the Russian National Committee related to BRICS research, dear guests, dear participants of this forum, ladies and gentlemen.
It is my great pleasure and honor to deliver opening remarks on the 12th BRICS Academic Forum. As you are well aware, this Saturday, 24th October, marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. At the General Assembly ceremony marking the 75th anniversary, Mr. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, underscored the changing nature of multilateralism and the need for a more networked and inclusive multilateralism. This is his call to address the situation where we have a surplus of multilateral challenges and a deficit of multilateral solutions. A networked in multilateralism means United Nations, family, international financial institutions, regional organizations, trading blocs, and others work together more closely, effectively. This new approach to strengthening multilateralism has direct relevance to BRICS as well as to the theme of this forum. Thus, let me share my observation on the potential contributions of BRICS to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the new global governance, especially in the view of the COVID-19 pandemic. Needless to say, the role of BRICS in the world economy is increasing. BRICS collectively represents about a quarter of the world's geographical area and is home to over 40% of the world's population. BRICS is the main driver of growth in the world economy, accounting for a half of the global economic growth. Along with expanding economic size, BRICS has been gaining greater influence in international trade and investment. It has placed itself as one of the world's key trading blocs. The BRICS countries are collectively sharing about 42% of global greenhouse gas emissions. They also play a major role in sharing the global direction of renewable and non-renewable resources. Its increased share in global economy and environment means its great potential in determining whether the international society achieves the 2030 Agenda, in particular, Sustainable Development Goals. BRICS could be a strong transformative force for achieving the 2030 Agenda in various aspects. BRICS leaders in the Xiamen Declaration in 2017 committed to implement the 2030 Agenda and to promote green development, calling for full implementation of the Paris Agreement. Achievement of the global agenda on sustainable development very much depends on the BRICS countries. The large share of the world population and a quarter of the geographical areas on Earth, driving force of economic development, challenge of environmental sustainability behind economic advancement, all suggest the key role that BRICS countries can or should play in leading the sustainable development. Poverty eradication in China and India made a key contribution to the achievement of Millennium Development Goal 1 and now SDG 1. Achieving SDGs, of course, is ever more challenging now with the COVID-19 pandemic. Across the world, many of the progress towards sustainable development have been wiped out by the pandemic. Nonetheless, it is encouraging to see that BRICS countries stand firm to cooperate and support multilateralism in the fight against the health emergency as well as implementation of SDGs. In this connection, I would like to share a few points on the potential roles of BRICS in connection with financing in science, technology, and innovation. For financing, the creation of the new development bank, NDB, has signified a new framework of cooperation based on equality and provided an additional financing mechanism. In connection with financing for sustainable development, I'm pleased to note that the sustainable infrastructure development has been at the core of NDB's operational strategy. NDB has been also active in financing COVID-related emergency assistance programs by issuing bonds in the international capital markets and providing several COVID-19 emergency program loans. Such are a good indication that how BRICS financial resources can be jointly utilized to support sustainable development in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Secondly, on SDI development, which can be a key accelerator for achieving SDGs. In the context of the fourth industrial revolution, SDI has been a key area of cooperation within BRICS and adopted the BRICS SDI framework program. The recent call for a multilateral research project in response to COVID-19 under the BRICS SDI framework program helps boost SDI cooperation further. Indeed, given the strong complementarity of the five countries, there is enormous potential to strengthen cooperation on technological innovation within BRICS. For instance, Brazil has a strong biofuel research and industry. The Russian Federation has advantages aerospace industry. India is a powerhouse of software development. China excels in telecommunications equipment and renewable energy. And South Africa leads in the coal chemical industry. In this regard, deepening collaboration on SDI within BRICS could provide new perspective on contribute to global scientific development. To conclude, I would like to reiterate the importance of stronger collaboration. The COVID-19 pandemic can be taken as an opportunity to reorient the development approach and accelerate progress towards the 2030 agenda. Thus, a transformative recovery from COVID-19 should be a pursuit to reduce risks from future potential crises, relaunching the implementation efforts to deliver the SDGs during the remaining 10 years before 2030. BRICS can play a strong role in this transformative recovery. Collaboration is not only among the governments. I would like to emphasize the importance of linking the knowledge with policies, effective communication between academics and policymakers. I'd like to congratulate this forum as an important initiative to achieve that goal. I wish you all a successful and fruitful forum. I'm looking forward to continuing our cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Basanjev. That was a really comprehensive address and really thoughtful. And indeed, the role of the BRICS in achieving the 2030 agenda is comprehensive, and United Nations remain the core for our activities and for cooperation, and we're looking forward and hoping to sustain long-term partnership as an expert community with the United Nations, with ESCAP, and with you personally. Thanks again for addressing us. Сейчас разрешите еще...
And now allow me to put on one more video address, as the pandemic has had a bad impact, so that many participants that would like to join, they couldn't actually arrive here physically. So let me introduce Mikhail Fratkov, who was our Prime Minister in the years 2004-2007, and right now he is a director of the Russian Strategic Research Institute, which is a big think tank that was established by the Russian president with the key objectives being information and analytics support of the president, State Duma, the parliament, Security Council of Russian Federation, and other bodies. So there were expert estimates and appraisals. That's what they do. So it's our pleasure to have Mr. Fratkov join us. Dear colleagues, dear friends, I'm glad to welcome organizers and participants of this forum. Thank you for the invitation to join. And I do hope that your operation will be fruitful, will be a success. It was a shrewd decision to convene such an event, so I wish you good performance, good work. So today the world is on a transition stage from a former development model to a new model. This is basically very evident, while the events of the last few years have supported that, have confirmed that. So there is a discrepancy between the existing global governance system and the actual challenges faced by humanity. So practically almost everybody understands that something is going on, and that calls for new thinking. Some drastic measures have to be taken. So this understanding has arrived. And we still have to develop some foundations of the future new world order, which is still being contemplated and being formed. So we have a pool of experts here today so that we can all give it a thorough thought and maybe produce some suggestions. The limits of the existing model were already known and were vividly shown earlier in the 21st century. And the world crisis of 2008 have shown that in all detail. So the need for a transformation of global governance has led to the establishment of new multilateral institutions, dialogue and cooperation, namely the BRICS group and the group of 20. So this is at least how we see it. So as it is today, the potential for development of these structures will definitely impact the establishment of the new world order. The emergence of these organizations have proved that the weight of the emerging markets is increasing. That is also an evidence of their willingness to participate in establishing of a more democratic, multipolar world order where durable peace and common prosperity should be provided for. So the regional four establishing countries at their summit at the Russian city of Yekaterinburg have stated that. In the last 2 years, the BRICS nations have to overcome serious challenges due to the attempts of some other countries to try to decelerate the development with some unilateral limitation measures, trade wars. So the severe reality today is that there are multiple political, technology and environmental, biological and other challenges, and a threat to the world safety and security is still there. There are still global terrorist groups. So regretfully, we have to state that in the last few years, the unpredictable character of the use of military force is there and has increased. And many experts are now actually talking in the terms of approaching war and the near military action. So what we are witnessing today is a whole line of hotspots worldwide, and they're looking for a new pretext for the interference of larger nations into the affairs of smaller nations, and there's a real danger of militarization of cyberspace and outer space. There is a trend to weaken the strategic stability worldwide, as the arms control system is continually degrading. The efficiency of operation of multilateral institutions is decreasing, and that is specifically alarming in the context of the above phenomena. The pandemic has tended to a catalyzer of the need to urgently upgrade the components of the new international relations system. So this pandemic has shown how critical joint action is. The world community members should face those global challenges of civilizational nature. So this conclusion refers not only to the pandemic proper, but all the other emergencies of natural or human character, both climatic and political crises of global or regional scale. Again, regretfully, we note that there is no real unification so far of the countries of the world to face the challenges jointly. We still don't see that. On the contrary, the existing contradictions in between the nations and larger groups of nations, they're still exacerbating further. So many of the measures that have been taken, they were and they still are of a unilateral nature, in many cases damaging the other nations. And that gave a reason for some politicians and experts to state the approaching end of globalization and the danger of a possible dangerous process of further fragmentation of the world. This should be noted specifically. So critical role in providing stability, security, and transfer to the new stage of international relations, that could be played by the BRICS group, which is a unique tool in global governance. I have been stating that before, and this is of importance. This seems like a general statement, but there's a real need to place and implement a specific action program so that many countries, your own country and your partner countries, should take an active part in world order reorganization. So this process is called to unite the countries really interested in a peaceful and secure development of whole humankind. So this is the vitality of today. We're talking about the humanity challenges. The Group of Five could turn into a platform to provide coordination and common goals and targets, developing new rules and regulations to allow the world community to overcome this crisis caused by the pandemic with smaller losses, to draw the necessary conclusions. And what is of specific importance, on the principles of basic equality for all participants, whatever their current situations are. So, setting up an effective model of international anti-crisis cooperation could be an active tool. What should be the foundations for that? Equality, mutual respect of interest, the supremacy of international law, priority of collective decision-making, and coordinated action carried out in full accordance. And there's a need for specific action within those general lines of approaches. All these principles are adhered to in a sustained way by all the members of the Group of Five, which is yet another evidence of their adherence to this noble objective of global rearrangement. We here in Russia believe that the strengthening of the BRICS group fully reflects an objective trend of establishing a polycentric, democratic international relations system. So the stand of the member states should be fully reflecting the interests of development, civilizational values, and the opinion of as many nations as possible to contribute to the regional and worldwide issues. So the agenda of the Russian chairmanship in the group shows that we are actively fighting international black trade, money laundering, terrorist groups, trafficking. So in this context, we believe that the member states should be promoting the UN-adopted international standards in order to counter terrorism and preventing proliferation of terrorist activities, and that includes the internet. BRICS member states providing their cyberspace security, that is of utmost importance, as these nations cover over 40% of world internet users. So developing everything that is related to modern approaches to internet, social media, which seems to be a specific objective for the experts only, but this is now of general government importance. Developing energy partnership is yet another major guideline. These countries consume 38% of the world energy. So building energy infrastructure is yet another important objective, to include pipelines, power lines, many other infrastructure cooperation within that industry. Russia, as we know, is one of the leading energy powers of the world, could substantially contribute to the partners in the area. An important area here is our cooperation in science, research and technology, furthering contacts and exchanges between experts, researchers, research teams of the member states. So our own institution, the Russian Strategic Research Institution, could contribute substantially as an expert think tank and contribute as much as we could to our common cause. In general, the 19th Academic Forum of the BRICS member states could contribute a lot, and that is still Russian chairmanship time. Russia has a substantial scientific potential in medicine, biotechnology, healthcare, space engineering, new materials. So this potential could be in high demand with our partners. So the member states face many challenges in finance and economy, and that includes improving and integrating the national payment systems. So developing an international payment system could be further enhanced by the financial messages transfer system as established by the Bank of Russia. So establishing a new payment system within the BRICS group would incentivize the payments in national currencies. It will expand the mutual investments between the member states, which already cover about 20% of the world direct investment traffic. So there's a need for daily efforts. We're firmly sure that it's only on the basis of collective efforts, joint response to challenges, so that we can elaborate more specific picture of the world order model that everybody's looking for it now. It has to be developed yet. But the role and contribution of the BRICS nations is very substantial. We are firmly assured that we should be establishing a more democratic, more fair world order system. And that will bring us to a more specific system of response measures for current acute challenges. Keeping international law as a reference and the leading role of international institutions, the UN being the leader. It's only in that case that we would be going further and trying to meet this objective is also set up by our president even before the pandemic. So our president said there should be globalization not only for selected people, but a globalization for all, for everybody with no exception. So I wish this academic forum a success. So in the coming days, using this platform, the site for the forum to the utmost. So make most of it. Have fruitful discussions. Try to acquire new knowledge, expertise, friendship, creative achievements, specific results, and in conclusion, I would like to wish you all stay healthy. All the best. Thank you for your attention. Let us thank Mikhail Fradko for his address and for the whole line of new ideas about the potential of the BRICS group, about the potential and capabilities of our cooperation by developing the global governance system. So Mr. Basanjav, Mr. Fradkov, all the other contributors, dear heads of the expert centers of the BRICS member states, dear participants of this forum, before I would pass the floor to the main contributor to this forum, Vyacheslav Nikonov, chairman of the State Duma, the Parliament Committee on Education and Science, the chairman of the Committee of the National Committee for BRICS Research Affairs. He is a prominent politician, scientist, historian, an expert in state governance affairs, and he is a member of the group of the Education Ministry and State and Higher Education Ministry of Russian Federation. He's member of the board of both, as the president of some think tanks like the Politica Foundation, Unity for the Name of Russia Foundation. So in line with the Russian president decree, this Russian World Foundation was established by Mr. Nikonov. He was first heading it as an executive director and then chairman of the board. So we all know the great number of publications, like 24 books published by Mr. Nikonov. And the main thing here for us is that we all do remember that the academic forum has a certain access for the expert track of the BRICS nations cooperation, and that was a certain fore-opener for the leaders meeting, forerunner. So we'll remember that it was specifically Mr. Nikonov who has come out with the initiative for the first academic forum, which took place 2008 in Moscow. And after that, there was actually a continuous movement further of this group, so that the next year there was a leaders summit, and there was an intensive operations along all the tracks year after year. This coordination has been improving, and the regular consultations have started on all the areas, so that this academic forum is preserving its role as a site for the more daring, more interesting, maybe breakthrough suggestions and propositions that would be further adopted on the official level. A vivid example of the efficiency of the second track being that some ideas have been later implemented in the New Development Bank, Network University of BRICS, and the Civil Forum of the BRICS group. Some of them have actually attended that event. So all that was originally an initiative from the expert community that had been voiced and tested at the academic forum. So indeed, within the framework of this track, we managed to prepare jointly with our friends from the Expert Centers Council of BRICS member states a whole range of important documents, both the evaluation of the economic partnership development, evaluation 15 to 20, and respectively the expansion of economic rights and potential of women, an initiative objectives and solutions, and the better solutions being in developing remote areas within BRICS group, and a whole range of other initiatives that we will, of course, try to cover when we'll do the closing procedure. So we'll need to first discuss the current issues jointly together here and to see the different degrees of attractiveness, the need, and the degree to which they are actually properly based. Making the agenda of BRICS more popular, promoting it. Regretfully, we've managed to succeed, only do one event before the borders were closed. Only one trip was actually performed to South African Republic, and our South African colleague will second that the event was actually a success. There's a whole range of events, so that it's a pity we did manage to do that in the other member state locations, but this is a track that will remain. Things like promoting and educating people about this agenda will remain an important track within the BRICS group of states. So we'll expand on this track.
As you know, Yevgeny Primakov, one of the founders, he said, "It's great when other countries want to work with you." And today we know that BRICS countries are not just a group of countries, it's the countries who the world community is listening to. And I really hope that our voice will be heard, as Minister Lavrov said. And I hope that Dr. Nikonov will tell us more, and perhaps after that our forum is going to be even more fruitful.
Dear friends and colleagues, nice to see you all, though on the screen. I hope my presentation will be smaller, shorter than the presentation of myself. I'm really happy to see you, but I'm not happy that I can see you only on the screen, or many screens which are here in this room. We wish to see you here in Moscow, in Russia, in this nice setting. Those who participated in the previous BRICS Academic Forum meeting in Moscow remember a nice hotel close to the Red Square. Now we are on the other side of the river with even better view of the, on St. Basil's and Kremlin and the Red Square, and we really miss you. We really wanted to see you here, and hope next time, though it will be 5 years, we'll have an opportunity to host you in Moscow. Unfortunately, there are some forces of history which can change everything. And we now know for sure that the major driving force of history is just a black swan. Now this black swan was in form of COVID-19, which changed the plans of everybody in the world and in every country in the world. It changed the global landscape. It changed the international relations. It made the life of foreign ministers, on the one hand, more easier. Mr. Lavrov, in one of the conversations, told me that he never slept that much as with the virus, and he never slept as little in the planes as during last year. But this also means that the intimacy in diplomacy is lacking. It's really very hard to exchange serious thoughts knowing that you are on the internet. So it's a different world of diplomacy. Every country underwent serious changes and many challenges. Some people say that the virus has already changed the world dramatically. Yes and no, it changed the world, but actually what we see now, what we face now, are the trends being strengthened. The trends which were already in play before the pandemic. Actually, the major question for the global community was how to face the challenge, united or by efforts of individual nations. And actually the answer, unfortunately, was not united. We are not more united as a human race today than before the virus. We are actually more divided. And the efforts to fight the disease were not international, they were mainly national. And that put the nations further apart from each other. Mr. Fratkov, who was speaking just before me, was speaking for globalization for everybody. It looks like we are facing globalization for nobody, since we are in the process of deglobalization. As you well know, globalization is a freedom of movement of people, of money, of goods and services. And what we see now is just the opposite. People are not moving. Money is saved and spent nationally. And of course, many countries are now, if not all the countries, are involved in isolationist foreign economic policies. As for, on the other hand, what the crisis showed that national states do matter. And this world of Westphalian states, which was buried so often in the recent years, are still there. The nation states do exist, governments do function, and they do matter. And all the international institutions which were supposed to play a great role in times of troubles showed that they do not play great roles in time of troubles. They just were doing nothing. Maybe I missed something, but I'd never heard anything about the IMF supporting anybody in the crisis, or the World Bank, or WTO, protecting any rights which actually have been violated by almost every nation. They are not there. The national institution is not there. Unfortunately, there are some exceptions, and of course, BRICS is one of them. We are cooperating. If we look at the consequences of the crisis for different parts of the world and different nations, we can see that, ironically, that the nation which suffered the most from any dimension is the United States of America. If you look at the economy, second quarter, America lost 32.8% of the GDP. It's 1/3 of the economy. This is the biggest decline, bigger than in any BRIC country, of course. If you look at the amount of people infected, the amount of people who died, America is well ahead of everybody. By the way, European Union is doing not much better. Of course, it's not 1/3 of the economy, but it's 1/5 of the economy. It's also a lot. And a lot of people are dying there. It turned out that many of the European countries do not have epidemiological services at all, zero, like in Italy. And actually, that means, with all the shortcomings in the BRICS countries, the shift of power towards BRICS, towards the East, towards Asia, actually, is accelerating. This spread of power is taking place, especially in favor of China, which managed to handle the pandemic crisis and managed to start the economic growth. That makes our cooperation of countries which have now different record of dealing with the crisis and with the virus even more imperative. In case of economic development, I think now we have in BRICS a unique opportunity. Try to catch the Chinese wind in our sails. China did pretty well. We just got the figures for the third quarter, and the growth of GDP is 4.9% compared not to the second quarter of this year, but to the third quarter of 2019. This is real growth. And industrial growth is 6.9%, again, not compared with the second quarter, but with the third quarter of 2019. That means China will produce most of economic growth this year. And as the neighbors of China and as partners of China, we can really hope to catch at least part of the wind which is now blowing in the sails of China, which I think is very important. Politically, we are becoming, I think, more influential internationally. Our voice in G20 is heard more and more loudly, in the United Nations as well. I think we have more to promote jointly. Of course, we can achieve a lot fighting the disease together. Well, you may know that Russia has already launched the vaccine. Actually, we've already launched 3 vaccines at this point, one of which has already been tested on many people, the second on a few people, and the third being just beginning to be tested. And some people say, oh, Russia, how come they made the vaccine? But I should remind you that immunology as science was started in Russia. Ilya Mechnikov, who is still leading the list of Nobel Prize nominations. He was nominated more often than anyone in the history of human race, or in the history of Nobel Prize. He got his Nobel Prize in 1906 for immunology. He studied that. Then, of course, even during World War II, which was the most, disastrous war one can imagine, Russia did not face any epidemic diseases. You may not know that the antibiotics were invented in Russia. You may or you may not know that the vaccines against SARS, Ebola, were also produced in Russia. And actually, Mechnikov's library, his books literally, are in the office of Professor Ginsberg, who was the inventor of vaccine number 1. So this is an old and very productive school which could not fail producing the first vaccine against the COVID-19. So at this point, Russia is ready to share the know-how, the technologies, the vaccine itself. Russia can help organize production in every BRIC country, and every BRIC country, as far as I know, is interested in this. So we are producing in our country, or expanding production, though we cannot cure the whole world. And BRICS can. And BRICS can cure the whole world. We, together, can provide enough vaccine for everybody on Earth, for all people, for women, children, for everybody who needs protection, and to stop the virus. BRICS can do it. And I think this is something which should be on top of our agenda. There are many other areas in which we can cooperate. Of course, education, which is now becoming more and more digital, which makes it more difficult to educate, but it makes more easier to communicate and use the know-how of other countries in your classrooms through through digital forms of education. And, it looks like for many countries and for many universities, schools, Zoom was the answer. Why Zoom? Why not national platforms for educational platforms which can be developed and which can be shared by our countries? The times of diseases is also the time when we have enough time to think. And we can think together more about BRICS, and we can think together more about our values. Because I insist, and I've insisted at all the previous meetings, especially making it the central part of my presentation in at our meeting in Brasilia, that we are the community of values. Values which make us strong. Values of sovereignty, freedom of choice, of development, freedom of choosing our own path, respect to our own country's civilization, to respective histories of each country, and to values which every country have. And we should take our partners as they are, not as as we want them to be. We may disagree, but basically we agree as human beings, as academics, as citizens of our great nations. Each country is strong enough to be alone and to live peacefully, but together we are much stronger. Together we are a major force in the international community. So, welcome to the academic forum. Welcome to Moscow. I'm looking forward to a very fruitful discussion, and everybody take care. Your health belongs to BRICS. That means your health is the treasure for all humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such an enlightening speech and very good finishing point about the health, and true that it's a most precious thing one can think of, and especially since we have very reputed experts all around this table and across the screens. It is true that BRICS and its progress does belong on the ability of all of us to continue on and to stay healthy and safe. Now we would further give the floor to the heads of our BRICS Think Tank Council. As you remember, BTTC has been launched as a decision of the BRICS leaders in 2013 in Durban, and there were two outreach formats established back then. It was BRICS Think Tank Council and BRICS Business Council. And those two entities were at the very start and remain the most important reference points for the leaders to look, to see into what's happening and how those councils could put forward the agenda and could enrich the agenda of the BRICS. So now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Ivan Oliveira, who is heading the national coordinator of Brazil of the BTTC. He is Deputy Director of International Studies, Political and Economic Relations of the Institute for Applied Economic Research. He's one of their veterans and longtime people in BRICS, and we've had a very fruitful years, not just last year and this year, but before as well, drafting and thinking on new ideas, new initiatives, and putting forward the vision for the BRICS. Ivan, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Victoria. Everyone, let me just double check. I'm hearing myself. There's an echo here. Let me see if it's better now. Well, thank you. It's great to be with you, although using online mechanisms, but it would be much better to see Mr. Nikonov again and have some good food in a good Russian restaurant, having good vodka. But anyway, hopefully we'll be able to do so soon. Let me, this is a daunting task to say something after my predecessors, Mr. Lavrov, in all the others, Mr. Nikonov. So we had very good explanations on BRICS, on how we achieved what we have achieved, and what are the main challenges ahead. So let me humbly bring you a couple of ideas, my two cents to the discussions and on this panel. And before that, just let me again congratulate the Russian presidency of the BRICS, especially think tanks and academic agenda. I think we are, in fact, starting a new momentum for BRICS academic and think tanks agenda, getting much closer to the policy-making world and making our work much better and focused in a way that we can really help more than what we've been doing up to now. So great work you've been doing, bringing the many changes we've seen in the academic and in think tanks agenda. So giving you my 2 cents on the BRICS and in this post-COVID world, again, I'm going to be repetitive in some aspects to my predecessors, given the great speeches we've seen. But what we've seen, and that's the main thing I think we can take out of the COVID-19 crisis right now, is that the crisis fast-tracked changes that were there, ongoing changes, but quite clearly from our day-to-day life, like how we adapted to telework and things like that, and to the global geopolitical and geoeconomic order. We've seen changes taken in months instead of years. And that's, I'd say, the main takeout of the COVID-19 we could see. So the new normal is not really that much new, but maybe it came faster than what we would have seen without the crisis itself. Obviously, the impacts are quite important, both economically and politically, be in domestic world or in the internationally. So we've seen many different political and economic changes in countries, and the harsh economic momentum that we're facing. But obviously, also there, we can see in the challenges to face the crisis, quite clear and good opportunities for deepening and broadening cooperation among the BRICS, for example. So the momentum is harsh, but let me just bring us back to what is the BRICS. So also already said by my predecessors that I think this crisis is again a good momentum for we came out as this group with many and different and more profound cooperation in a momentum of crisis. So the BRICS, the DNA of BRICS has to do with innovation, with ideas of creating a new world order. Obviously, at first much more focused on global economic governance agenda, but then, as we've seen throughout the years, deepening a lot the cooperation, sectoral public policy issues, and different global developmental issues too. So the DNA of BRICS is a DNA that pretty much helps, in my opinion, to deal with the crisis, because we are a product of a crisis somehow. We are a product of change. So change is pretty much the basis of what we've been established for, to do something new in the world order and take into account new perspectives that are there and pretty much linked to the values of the BRICS, as Mr. Nikonov has just stressed. So readapting to this juncture, I'd say is much easier for BRICS in our joint efforts than in many other groups. I'd say even for the G20 agenda, you're also participating in, and we have a say. I'd say it's much easier for us because we are product of change, and somehow we represent change in the world, as we've seen in what we've been doing up to now. So in this new normal, in this maybe a good momentum for deepening BRICS cooperation, I'd say in the three pillars that I see of our cooperation, we can see very good ideas going on and to face the challenges of this crisis that we're facing. Be in the sectoral and public policy, let's say more bilateral or pentalateral relations regarding health issues, regarding educational issues, digital economy and things like that, that our ministries are dealing. Agriculture, education, science and technology, a very important one for sure, with multi-dimensional aspects to be taken into account. So in this pillar, definitely I think the crisis has already been taken as an opportunity, and I'd say that we could see during the Russian presidency good ways forward. I just mentioned on energy what has been done in the roadmap for BRICS cooperation on energy, or even in the implementation of the platform of research in energy. So lots to do, and we've been tackling the problems and delivering in this first pillar. And the second one that has to do with joint and innovative solutions for global development, I'd say, and already I think Mr. Lavrov has mentioned it, that is how the NDB has been playing a very significant role in this momentum. So we have a new facility for emergency loans with $4 billion. 3 out of the 4 are already taken to help support health systems and social safety nets in our country. So definitely one of the good solutions that we have seen implemented by the BRICS in the last couple of years, that is the NDB, is pretty much, again, taking the crisis and delivering innovative solutions in order to help our countries deal with the crisis. And then in the third pillar, when it comes to global governance, and that's a very important issue, I think, and the very first one that brought us together, and where we have so much to do right now, I think there is definitely, again, not just for the COVID-19 crisis, but for the ongoing changes that were there. They're fast-tracked quite clearly because of the COVID-19 crisis. The idea of having a more effective and transparent and just balanced multilateral institutions, that is pretty much, again, the basis, and it is in the values of the BRICS agenda in the world. And again, going back to Nikonov's presentation, something that continues to bring us together, and that's the basis of our cooperation. We also see plenty of challenges there. Maybe in this area we have a lot more to do, obviously, because it has global impacts and negotiations, but reinforcing these rules-based systems is pretty much something that we all are comfortable and we're keen to do, and being in the WTO or in other institutions where we do need reform, again here, challenges ahead, but the BRICS do have something to say, and something to say jointly, and that's something very important. So on those three pillars, I think the crisis has somehow made us stronger and made us find new solutions. Again, going back to the basic ideas that is we are part of an innovative way of seeing the world and trying to find solutions to the problems of the world. So building confidence is essential. Just and balanced world order is the basis, and the social environmental development in our countries continue to be important goals that we go for in our day-by-day work, and the BRICS have been able to deliver a lot. Obviously, many challenges ahead, many difficult things. We're not going to solve. Not here, maybe not in a decade, but again, we're much better and stronger together in order to find or try to find solutions to the problems we face. Well, those are my 2 cents to the discussions. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to the debates in the academic forum. Definitely, I'm sure we're going to have great presentations and debates and ideas that will continue to push the BRICS forward. Long live the BRICS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivan. Indeed, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, and BRICS is really a good example in here, because we saw that the challenges we faced all, and our resilience actually grew, and we managed to become a much better, much more cohesive grouping with that, because we showed, counter to their general tendencies in the world, that we are together and we can turn challenges into opportunities, not just for the benefit of the 5 countries, but for the rest of the world. And I'm sure we'll continue in the same manner. Now we would like to give the floor to Dr. Samir Saran, who is also our very long-time friend and a president of Observer Research Foundation. And ORF is one of Asia's most influential think tanks. It works with the board, provides strategic direction and leadership to the government and internationally. Dr. Saran curates the Raisina Dialogue, India's annual flagship platform on geopolitics and geoeconomics, together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He also chairs Sci-Fi, which is India's annual conference on cybersecurity and internet governance. You just had it successfully held. Really, congratulations on that. It was also a great event, even though mostly online, but nevertheless, it was wonderful. And also Samir has been involved in BRICS from the very start, and we're always happy to see him online and more so offline. So we hope for this time. Samir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Victoria, Dr. Panova, for inviting me to speak on this very special day. And greetings to my dear friend, Slava, Dr. Nikonov. When BRICS started, both Slava and I did not need glasses. We now both wear glasses to help us communicate with the world. So I think we have come a long way in the BRICS.
Very important now, yes.
So indeed, we have seen many seasons together. And this is an important moment. I think I share the optimism and the hope expressed by the minister, by Slava, by my dear friend from Brazil, and my greetings to all the colleagues from the BRICS countries. And we hope to see you in India next year. And like I promised Victoria, she will co-chair the events so that we can make up for the online or the offline activities that we missed in Russia. So we will have a Russian flavor in India next year, and we will try to make up for this 1 year. But I would like to sound a degree of caution as well. Simply because I'm invested in this project, as Victoria mentioned, since 2008, when I was invited to a very cold day in Moscow and asked about the prospects of putting together a group that will challenge hegemony, that will challenge the dominant narratives coming from a group of countries that will challenge the absolute control of one country over world affairs, and whether we needed a more multipolar, democratic, and plural international order. If Slava remembers, those were the initial conversations we had in various parts before the first meeting was held in 2009. And my philosophical question to Slava especially, and to others who have been with me for the last 20 years, is that if BRICS is a change agent, if we are the disruptors, if we are those who seek balance in the world, if we are those who challenge hegemony, if we are those who challenge the dominant narrative, are we going to continue to do that? And are we going to challenge the new hegemony and the new dominant narratives and the new winds that might be blowing? And I think our role to be a balancer, philosophical balancer, remains most important at this moment when the world affairs are at a crossroad. And I think that ethic of BRICS as being the organization that creates pluralism and democracy in the international order remains very, very critical at this moment. It's not that the pandemic has changed the world. I think what the pandemic has done, it has told us and it has magnified everything that was wrong with the world in the last few years. And there are 5 worrying signs for me, which I want to alert all of us to, so that we can debate as a group, as a family, as a community over the next sessions and come up with solutions that will help both us as thinkers and, of course, our leaders as policymakers and governments. The first trend that I'm witnessing, and which is quite worrisome, is that what was earlier a degree of creeping nationalism, small nationalist tendencies that were appearing in every part of the world, have now become hyper. We are witnessing hyper nationalism across the global landscape. It does not matter which kind of regime you live under, authoritarian, communist, democratic, capitalist, it doesn't matter. We are seeing nationalism all prevalent. Now, if nationalism and hyper-nationalism are the new mood on the streets in many countries, how do we ensure global integration and global projects, such as the BRICS, remain relevant? BRICS is not a regional project. BRICS is not an economic grouping. BRICS is not an historical grouping. BRICS is not a civilizational grouping. BRICS is a modern global project to reshape and ensure balance in the world, like I said earlier. So in the face of hyper-nationalism of all varieties, how do we create a global community and a global project such as BRICS? How do we keep it relevant? How do we keep it strong? How do we strengthen it? And I think we must think about it. We must think about BRICS in the next decade as we meet this year. The second trend that worries me around the international order, and I'm sticking to the theme Victoria sent to me, challenges around the global governance and how can the BRICS respond to these this moment. So the second challenge that I see, and I'm going to invoke the 20th century, is the absence of positive superpowers in world affairs. Now, I have always argued that multilateralism worked when there were 1, 2, 3, or a clutch of countries that underwrote the stability of the multilateral system. Multilateralism was never a coincidental project. It was a deliberate project. Countries underwrote it, guaranteed it. They took action when people strayed. They rewarded when people conformed. What we saw during the pandemic was the complete absence of any superpower. The 2 largest economies were implicated in the pandemic in different ways. One was missing from action and the other was implicated in other manners. We saw the largest countries all looking inward, looking at themselves, fending for themselves, solving their own problems. And it was Darwin's world that was unfolding over the last 7 to 8 months. So the idea that you can have a multilateral system without having an anchor is an unworkable ideal. And can we, as a group of countries, provide that anchor? Can we be the anchor of an order which allows the world to work together, which prevents the politicization of international institutions or political capture of institutions for the benefit of 1 or 2 countries? We have to make sure that the absence of an overwhelming superpower like the US or USSR is made up by a group of multiple actors who underwrite the stability of the international system. And I think that is, again, a political project that we need to be discussing in the days ahead. The third, of course, is what is perhaps the most worrisome, is the weaponization of trade and technology. We are seeing, all through history, even at the worst political moments, economic lines kept open. We saw telecommunication lines were always open. You could pick up the phone and end the war. You did not cut off telecommunications even when you were fighting with each other. I am worried that we are now seeing a degree of weaponization of technology and trade that we can actually disrupt our digital integration and our trade integration. And we need to find new ways of ensuring that the perverse and political implications on trade and technology are minimized. And we have to find some normative framework that allows at least a minimum degree of integration even between those who disagree. At least a minimum degree of integration that allows countries who desperately need a global trading system to move their people out of poverty, to succeed. We need a degree of economic arrangements that allow financial flows to reach people who need money for their development agendas. So I think it is an imperative today to create a framework that prevents the collapse of the efforts of the past around trade, economy, and certainly technology. And I think that's something is a challenge for us as well as a grouping. And how can we respond to it? How can we ensure that everyone plays by a set of rules, by a set of principles, by a set of ethics, which allow this minimum degree of cohesion? The fourth is we are seeing what I would argue is gated globalization. We are seeing ideologically oriented trading blocks emerging. We are seeing disruptions in the global value chains of the past. We are seeing, based on politics and based on political considerations, lending activities, financial activities, procurement activities, manufacturing activities, and we are seeing the disruption of what we built up so assiduously. Global value chains have lost, people have lost faith, trust around the global value chains because of what transpired in the last 8 months. Capture of pharmaceutical chains, capture of ventilators, capture of masks, capture of PPE, capture of all sorts of materials by certain actors in different parts, created a distrust on the importance and on the vitality of these value chains. How can we restore a degree of faith in many of these very important linkages that allow the world to work efficiently? If everyone is going to build entirely for themselves, then like Slava mentioned, the Russian breakthrough on the Sputnik vaccine or the other 2 vaccines which are on the pipeline will never reach the world. The Sputnik vaccine will have to find a manufacturing base in India or some other country to be able to scale up to be produced for meeting global requirements. But that requires faith and trust, and we have lost that. The global value chains require preservation, and I think we need to discuss that. And finally, the fifth most worrisome trend is that there seems to be a consensus between the elite and the street that globalization is bad. And this is happening in advanced economies, this is happening in emerging economies, this is happening in developing countries. We are seeing a general estimation that globalization is not helping everyone. We are seeing inequality rise. We are seeing hundreds and millions of people moving into poverty, but we are also witnessing certain companies creating lots of value for themselves. We are seeing the perverse implications of globalization, of our economic models, of our trade models, creating disenchantment and retrenchment against the global project. Globalization requires reform. Global institutions require to be reformed. Global bureaucracy needs to be closer to the constituencies they serve. The distance between community and the capitals need to reduce. We need far more local conversations happening in this global project. And globalization cannot be seen to be a project that benefits the rich and the powerful. It has to be seen to be a project that benefits all. We need to create new champions of globalization. We need to create a new momentum for globalization. And I think, again, since we come from very different economic, political, and geographical dimensions, can a global community like this work on globalization 4.0 or whatever new version people are terming it? But the new version of globalization requires a whole new ethic. Can we, amongst us, in the next few days, build this idea? Now, let me end with two notes of optimism and two notes of and two challenges for everyone who's engaging with each other here. Optimism. I believe that if the climate change agenda has to succeed, the BRICS countries have to succeed in their climate agendas. So in some sense, the climate agenda is a BRICS agenda. We have amongst the largest emitters and the largest energy producers and the most innovative communities in the BRICS. If we get the climate policies right, we can respond to the global challenge around climate. So BRICS should become climate should become a BRICS agenda. Similarly, SDGs is a BRICS undertaking. If we get the development goals right, and I must congratulate the Russian presidency for stressing on the importance of data and collecting indicators and other markers which are important, the SDGs should become a totem pole for BRICS countries. And these are the two opportunities we have to establish ourselves as a force for good. Two challenges that I want to place before you. First, if we are honest, we will agree that because of what has happened in the last 8 months and a few months before that, we are at the lowest political excitement for BRICS that I have witnessed in the last 12 years. I think we need to create new political momentum. We need to drum up support in our own constituencies, and we need to find new energy if this project has to get the political backing that it needs. So can we create a new political momentum for BRICS? And that will have to, of course, factor in what has happened around the world, between countries, amongst BRIC nations as well. And I think that political challenge is one thing that we have to think about. We cannot brush it under the carpet. BRICS cannot be an organization which professes certain ethics for the world and chooses different ethics for its members. There must be a degree of cohesion between the two. And the second, how do we ensure that the previous momentums of reaching out to others helps us become a project that is accepted by many more countries than just the regions that we inhabit? So can we truly become an actor? Can the NDB, can various institutions that we want to build and we are investing into actually become providers of global services? And I still believe that every time we meet, we are still restricting ourselves to the small group of neighboring countries which are most important to the individual BRIC host. Can BRICS transcend their regions, and can they look at the world as the oyster, and can BRICS serve global agendas? Thank you very much for inviting me. Best of luck to the Russian presidency. Congratulations for doing such a great job despite being online. And next year we will add a Russian flavor to the Indian deliberations.
Thank you, Samir. I'm sure we'll do a great job together. And thank you for all your brilliant ideas and those go in line. And in fact, I usually call BRICS a beacon, and I think anchor even a more solid comparison. So this way we could make sure that the world in the stormy days is safe, thanks to the BRICS. So when we are remaining an anchor, we are here to stay, and our ship will be solid. Thank you. Now we're having our next speaker. I'd like to give floor to Ms. Huan Yihua, who is the Deputy Director General of the Research Office of International Department of CPC, Deputy Secretary General of the China Council for BRICS Think Tank Cooperation. And so she's the head of the delegation from China. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Distinguished Foreign Minister Lavrov, dear colleagues, good evening from Beijing. First of all, on behalf of the China Council for BRICS Think Tank Cooperation and the participating scholar on the Chinese side, I'd like to extend my thanks to the organizer, the Russian National Committee on BRICS Research, for your great efforts in making this forum possible. I would also like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to colleagues from Brazil, India, and South Africa for your great support for our work. Currently, the world is experiencing profound changes unseen in a century. The COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the evolution of these changes. Standing at the crossroad of human society and faced with increasingly severe challenges at global scale, BRICS countries should assume their common responsibilities and mission, gather consensus, and work together to safeguard the correct direction of human development and progress. BRICS countries should be a staunch defender of multilateralism. The recently convened 75th UN General Assembly has sent a strong signal to the international community and reiterated the collective commitment to multilateralism. BRICS cooperation is a product of the collective self-reliance of emerging economies, and multilateralism is the inevitable choice and historical fate of BRICS countries. There's no other choice for the BRICS countries but to hold high the banner of multilateralism, resolutely safeguard the international system with the UN at the core, the international order based on international law, and the multilateral trading system represented by the WTO, oppose unilateralism and defines the contract spirit, and oppose provoking ideological and social system antagonism so as to safeguard the legitimate rights and development space of developing countries. Second, BRICS countries should be an active participant in global governance. This pandemic has exposed the flaws and weakness in the existing global governance system, which is inadequate to deal with new threats and challenges. This has brought an opportunity for BRICS countries to play a bigger role on the international stage and to guide the global development agenda. Therefore, BRICS countries should strengthen coordination and cooperation in improving the global governance system to safeguard the common interests. To this end, we should improve the efficiency of international organizations represented by the UN, WTO, WHO, by promoting reform in them so as to modernize the global governance system and governance capacity. Meanwhile, we should also take fairness into account and ensure that the reform process is driven collectively by all countries rather than by just a few. In particular, it is necessary to jointly promote global governance rules in the fields of economy, trade, climate change, energy, polar region, cyberspace, and outer space that fully reflect the interests of the majority of the countries, especially emerging market and developed countries. Third, BRICS countries should be an important guide in the united efforts against the pandemic. Unity and cooperation are the most powerful weapons in the fight against the pandemic. It is important to accelerate the building of a BRICS Vaccine Research and Development Center, form synergy by pooling each country's advantages in vaccine R&D and production, so as to contribute to the affordability and accessibility of the COVID-19 vaccines in developing countries. Meanwhile, it is important to strengthen support for international organizations represented by the WHO. China has officially joined COVAX after the development of Chinese vaccines is completed and they are available for use. The vaccines will be made a global public good and they will be provided to the other developing countries on a priority basis. In terms of post-pandemic reconstruction, BRICS countries should strengthen coordination in macroeconomy policies and establish a green channel for the cross-border flow of people and goods. Meanwhile, the view of the new industries and modes brought by the pandemic, we should intensify the BRICS partnership on new industrial revolution and tap into cooperation potential in the fields of digital epidemic control, digital economy, and digital governance, so as to inject the impetus to the world's post-pandemic economic recovery. Last, BRICS countries should be a strong advocate of the new type South-South cooperation. According to statistics, the pandemic will plunge nearly 100 million people into poverty, which urgently needs the international community to accelerate the global poverty reduction process by gathering consensus and working together. BRICS countries should continue to uphold the spirit of solidarity and mutual help, actively advocate the new type South-South cooperation, and provide help for developing countries to achieve the goals in poverty reduction and sustainable development. We very much appreciate the Russian side's adoption of promoting the development of remote areas into the priority issues in this year's summit. This year also marks the final year in China's decisive battle against poverty. Under the leadership of the Central Committee of CPC, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, China has lifted over 10 million people out of poverty for 7 consecutive years. So far, we have helped over 700 million Chinese get out of poverty and contributed to over 70% of the poverty in the world has reduced. In spite of the impact of the pandemic, we still have the confidence to achieve the poverty reduction target in the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda 10 years in advance. The Chinese side is willing to share our key secrets in poverty reduction with other developing countries and contribute wisdom and strength to global poverty reduction and sustainable development with concrete actions. In this era of complexities and intertwined changes, BRICS countries should take the initiative to assume their historical mission, think about what's happened to the world together, and answer what should we do together, and drive BRICS cooperation towards a better direction. First, we should plan for development for BRICS cooperation with a forward-looking way of thinking. We should set the tides of the times, lead the development trend, play well the role of source producer and policy promoter, acutely perceive and judge the evolution of the international pattern and international situation, set and promote the high-level strategic goals of BRICS cooperation, and lead all parties to build a bright future of BRICS cooperation. Second, we should contribute advice for pragmatic BRICS cooperation by strengthening joint research. We should not only put forward plausible policy suggestions in traditional cooperation areas such as economy, trade, finance, infrastructure construction, energy, and agriculture, but also conduct plausibility research and dig out BRICS cooperation potential on key emerging areas related to BRICS cooperation of the future, such as the new industrial revolution, digital economy, artificial intelligence, and public security. Third, we should promote people-to-people exchange cooperation among BRICS countries by intensifying exchanges and mutual learning. We should actively explore the academic activities and expert exchange mechanism under the new normal of the epidemic situation, and further enrich the connotation of people-to-people exchanges through innovative online activities. Meanwhile, we should also pay attention to strengthening publicity so that people from the 5 countries may feel the effective advancement of BRICS cooperation. China Council for BRICS Think Tank Cooperation is willing to work together with all parties and contribute strength to intensifying BRICS cooperation and promoting the new type South-South cooperation. The CCBTC will also contribute to build platforms offer opportunities, and provide assistance within its capacity for the communication and exchanges among BRICS think tanks. Finally, I'd like to once again thank the Russian side for your tremendous amount of work you have done for this forum. And I wish this academic forum a great success and hope that we can meet each other offline very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Yuhua Huang. And this is true that now we know that BRICS is not just the anchor in the stormy times and not just a solid foundation for economic recovery of the world. It is especially good to hear from number one PPP economic power that the primary asset are the people. Not just even PPP. So that people are the primary asset, and that is where BRICS stands for on the exchanges between the people. Thank you so much. And now our next fifth member of the BRICS Think Tank Council, head of the South African part, I'd like to give the floor to Professor Sifamandla Zondi, who is the chair of the South African BRICS Think Tank Council. Mr. Sifamandla Zondi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody, and appreciation again to the chairperson and to the speakers before me, my colleagues. I share their perspectives on the number of matters that have been put on the table. I want to appreciate and honor Foreign Minister Lavrov and the other speakers, Fradkov, Dr. Nakonov, and Basanov for their input. I am aware that quite a lot of stuff has been covered. I will not go over what has been covered, so I would just suggest four things that were my take out of the presentations by the delegation that came to present to us, and also some of the elements that came from what my colleagues have presented. The first thing is, as we meet right now, at this point in 2020, as the academic forum for BRICS, the issue that's been placed on the table and came out very strongly in Minister Lavrov's presentation as well, is that the vision remains important. Both the vision of the world from those who have been thinking critically about the world, the vision of the world beyond the one that is dominated by a few, the vision of the world as enshrined in the UN Charter, the vision of a multilateral world, a multipolar world, a dialogue. One. Secondly, the vision that gave rise to BRICS and the reason for its existence. Whatever the impact of COVID-19 and many other challenges that remain there, that vision remains very strong and remains the vision to drive everything that we do in response to the issues that face us today. The second one is that I think in the presentation, the theme of crisis and change came out very strongly, and I agree it's an important thing to place on our platform as we think about all the things we think about, and we'll be discussing in the next 2 days, that the incidence of COVID-19 pandemic was just one in a number of signals that our system is in crisis. The world system as we know it after 1945 is in crisis. A number of issues were mentioned, but one very specific one that represents that crisis is that when we were required to be united as the world against a common challenge which was hitting all of us in a very huge way, instead of uniting, we fragmented. And we fragmented not because we chose to, but because there are systemic dynamics that makes fragmentation the natural one. Ultranationalism, excessive unilateralism, and all of those are part of this, the evidence of the crisis that is faced by the system, and that the COVID-19 came to remind us about those points of crisis. But that crisis is also indicative of a change that is beckoning, of a rearrangement that is almost inevitable, and therefore the strategic role that BRICS has in that. So there is a crisis in every level, a political level, economic level, a social level. It's a crisis of the system, and that crisis is pregnant with change. The third theme that came out of all this presentation, came out in all of them, is that, but in this crisis, there is a potential. There's an opportunity, sorry. There's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to fashion this new world, opportunity to author the new responses to the problem, the post-COVID-19 world, the post-COVID-19 system of international cooperation, the manner in which we respond to the vulnerable, the manner in which we implement what we already have from SDG and others in order to better respond to the crisis. So there is an opportunity in the mess. There's an opportunity in the adversity. There's an opportunity in all of this. And these opportunities are already in front of us, have already been seized upon by some in the course of responding to the crisis, but also working out what would be a post-crisis economic recovery and other forms of recovery. So it's not an opportunity that is coming, it's an opportunity that is already being seized. Our friend from the UN was indicating something about innovative financing for development that is already beckoning. Was indicating efforts already to move beyond just state-to-state cooperation, but cooperation that goes beyond governments, beyond state, towards the people. So it's an opportunity being seized right now. The opportunity to reinvigorate the values, the freedoms, and work out ways of harnessing digitization and all of those things. So there is an opportunity. And lastly, there is also potential. There is potential for BRICS to play a critical role in seizing these opportunities, in responding to the crisis, and in keeping alive an age-old vision of a globalization for all, rather than a globalization for few, of a world of many pillars, rather than a world of one or two pillars, of a world that is defined by all the civilizations of the world, not a world defined by one and everybody fitting. That vision can still be carried forward. But this implies that BRICS needs to do a few things. One, it needs, and it comes up in this presentation too, needs to continue to sharpen its focus and never lose its focus on why it was born to do. And as somebody indicated, the very birth of BRICS itself was an indication that the system was in crisis. New things were being born, but the system is struggling to die, taking a long time to die. Secondly, BRICS need to strengthen its capacity, the capacity to live up to the expectations. It requires that BRICS must be really strong institutionally, very strong in terms of vision, very strong in terms of agenda, and continue to strengthen the mechanisms for it to do all that it needs to do. And one way of strengthening it is to build and fortify internal cohesion within BRICS. It's not sufficient for BRICS to be united about the external agenda, but not sufficiently united in terms of intra-BRICS cooperation and coordination and solidarity and so on. And thirdly, the BRICS needs to improve its march forward. It needs to do that with greater vigor, do that with greater effort. That could be done by reinvigorating the efforts to reform and transform the world order, by strengthening cooperation and solidarity across the world, by leading in ensuring that globalization includes all, by, very critically for us, fully realizing the potential of BRICS Plus. BRICS Plus makes BRICS a much more significant global actor than sometimes we realize. It makes BRICS a platform for over 40 countries in some cases, when some people calculate the number of countries that have been interfacing with BRICS. But that's a potential to build a global consensus about the future world. And very lastly, it is very important that this potential is used for BRICS to play a leading role in defining a post-COVID world. Thank you very much for this opening ceremony. We wish our friends in Russia a great success as we discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zandi. I know there are quite a lot of questions already coming for the speakers, but before that, I'd like to ask, and this shows, in fact, how much importance BRICS is given to the United Nations and how much the UN norms and principles, the Charter principles are at the core, at the heart of our activities and of our thoughts. I would like now to give the floor for some comments to Mr. Vladimir Kuznetsov, who is now the Director of Information Center of the United Nations in Moscow. He served previously in numerous diplomatic positions, both in MFA and international organizations. And so the floor is yours, Dr. Kuznetsov.
Dear Dr. Panova, thank you for this opportunity to speak to such an honorable assembly. But if you permit, I will deliver my message in Russian. Уважаемая Виктория Владимировна, уважаемые участники форума, мне очень приятно приветствовать организаторов и участников академического форума БРИКС от лица секретариата Организации Объединенных Наций и страновой команды ООН в Российской Федерации, объединяющие 20 агентств системы Организации Объединенных Наций, работающие в России. В этом году он отмечает свой 75-летний юбилей. А задача содействия международному сотрудничеству в области науки и образования, закрепленная в Уставе ООН, была и остается в течение этих 75 лет одной из наиболее приоритетных в деятельности Всемирной организации. Прочный мир должен строиться на основе диалога и взаимопонимания, а также на интеллектуальной и нравственной солидарности человечества. В текущем году дан старт десятилетию действий для выполнения повестки Дня ООН на период до 2030 года, принятой главами государств-членов в 2015 году и включающей 17 целей устойчивого развития. Выполнение этих целей так или иначе невозможно без международного сотрудничества, самого активного международного сотрудничества в сфере науки, культуры, образования, справедливого обмена знаниями и технологиями. В рамках Департамента глобальных коммуникаций ООН, который, в частности, представлен в России информационным центром ООН, на протяжении многих лет существует программа Academic Impact. Это взаимодействие с академическими кругами. Цель этой глобальной инициативы, реализуемой совместно с научными центрами и высшими учебными заведениями, максимально широкое распространение научных знаний, образования, возможность делиться знанием и опытом с теми, кто в этом нуждается. С 2010 года в рамках Academic Impact создано динамичное и разноплановое сообщество преподавателей, ученых, студентов, исследователей, научно-исследовательских центров, курсов повышения квалификации и профессиональных ассоциаций в области образования. Успешная работа этих учебных заведений, исследовательских центров крайне важна для достижений целей устойчивого развития. Ведь именно тут зарождаются новые идеи, совершаются открытия и находятся решения многих глобальных проблем. Мы призываем академический форум БРИКС активно взаимодействовать с этой глобальной инициативой Организации Объединенных Наций. Это особенно актуально в период, когда весь мир столкнулся с проблемой, которая затронула все страны. Это пандемия коронавирусной инфекции. Этот глобальный вызов не может быть решен усилиями отдельно взятой страны или стран, какими могущественными они ни были. Борьба с COVID-19 требует от нас взаимодействия и солидарности, вне зависимости от территориальных границ, различий между поколениями или разграничениями между секторами экономики. Сейчас, как никогда ранее, мировому научному сообществу, да и обществу в целом, очевидна необходимость обмениваться информацией, данными последних исследований, найти способы и средства, чтобы помочь пострадавшим в результате коронавируса, включая тех, кто потерял средства к существованию, а также приложить все усилия, чтобы после восстановления мы стали сильнее и более устойчивы к подобного рода потрясений. Предпринятые в ответ на пандемию меры государств-членов показали, что многие преобразования, которые казались невозможными всего несколько месяцев назад, могут быть осуществлены в короткие сроки, при условии, что существует политическая воля на самом верху и что политическое руководство сможет заручиться поддержкой заинтересованных сторон и общественных кругов. COVID-19 сравнивают с рентгеновским лучом, обнаруживающим трещины в хрупком скелете общества, который мы построили. Он высвечивает повсеместное заблуждение и ложь, в частности ложь о том, что свободные рынки могут обеспечить здравоохранение для всех. Миф о том, что все мы в одной лодке. На самом деле, по образному выражению генерального секретаря ООН, хотя все мы оказались в одном море, очевидно, что одни бороздят его на суперяхтах, в то время как другие цепляются за плавающие обломки. Он работает над сокращением неравенства каждый день, повсюду. Заглядывая в будущее, можно сказать, что 21 век будет определяться двумя кардинальными темами. Это климатический кризис или кризис глобального потепления и цифровыми преобразованиями. Отмечу, что некоторые разработки современных технологических и инновационных центров вызывают самую серьезную озабоченность. Это цифровой разрыв, который усиливает социально-экономическое неравенство. В 2019 году в развитых странах интернетом пользовались примерно 87% жителей, в то время как в наименее развитых странах доля пользователей составляла лишь 19%. Пандемия коронавируса показала, что без доступа к новейшим технологиям, в частности к интернету, невозможно организовать ни рабочий, ни учебный процесс, да и просто повседневную жизнь. COVID-19 — это, конечно, трагедия для всего человечества, но она также дает нам шанс, редкий шанс, возможность построить более равноправный и устойчивый мир. По мнению генерального секретаря, реагирование на пандемию и на предшествовавшее ей повсеместное недовольство должно основываться на новом общественном договоре и новом глобальном договоре. Эти новые форматы призваны создать равные возможности для всех и должны обеспечить уважение прав и свобод каждого. Сейчас контуры этих новых форматов находятся в стадии обсуждения, но принципиально важно, чтобы участие в этом обсуждении приняли участие академические круги, те, кто обладает интеллектуальным багажом для того, чтобы внести сюда свою лепту. Не менее важно, чтобы в научную экспертную деятельность вовлекались женщины, молодежь, люди с ограниченными возможностностями, которые имеют колоссальный потенциал в области научного знания. Происходящие на планете события убеждают в необходимости международного сотрудничества в области науки. Добиться этого можно, развивая диалог между странами, культурами и народами. Диалог цивилизаций. Сегодня в условиях глобализации, перед лицом новых проблем и угроз, нависших над человечеством,
And
Когда не хватает
with the new
взаимопонимания,
challenges facing humanity,
диалог
we
необходим
see a
как
lack
никогда
of
ранее.
mutual understanding.
Люди
So
сегодня
there's a need
чувствуют себя
for
более
real
уязвимыми,
understanding. People
но в
feel
то же
more
время
vulnerable
они
these
стремятся
days,
использовать все возможности
while they're
для
still trying to
развития
use all the
межкультурного,
possible ways to develop
межнаучного обмена
intercultural,
и
scientific
взаимопонимания, обмена знаниями.
exchange for better
Укрепление
understanding and knowledge
сотрудничества
exchange,
посредством науки,
strengthening cooperation
образования и
by the ways
культуры
of science,
– это
education and
один из
culture
столпов, на
is one of
которых
the
стоит
pillars
Всемирная организация.
that the UN is relying
Желаю
on.
участникам академического форума успешной работы. Благодарю за внимание.
Successful operation for all the participants. Thank you, Vladimir. A very important message that you have conveyed. So, colleagues, as I said, we have a lot of comments and issues and comments here in writing, but I know that we'll have to let some of our colleagues go and leave us. But I know we have questions registered from Mr. Telleraya, from Dmitry Savkin, also from Mr. Orlov. So please follow this sequence to voice your queries, please, and then we'll take more questions.
Thank you.
Georgi,
I was
please.
impressed, Samir, by your eloquent and thought-provoking presentation. Well, BRICS being the sort of anchor of stability, and with the need to cooperate with other centers of power. What about the main one, United States? Actually now the world problem is that US has problems. And US is not the hegemon it used to be, but still it can do a lot of harm. It can do a lot of good. But how can BRICS accommodate the US? How BRICS can cooperate and engage United States to bring them into the new global setup, into new global order? Maybe BRICS should act together. Well, based on the fact that you mentioned that no new hegemony should be allowed, and this is why BRICS should act together. What do you think?
Professor Toleraya, thank you for your question. Let me use this opportunity to stress an important point. I think BRICS has an identity which comprises of 5 actors, and individual BRIC countries have their own identities as well. All of us have an individual agenda, and all of us have a common agenda. And the strength of BRICS was that we did not tie each other up in choosing one particular form of future. We could have our own ambitions, we could have our own directions, and yet where we agreed, we would come together and work as a group. So in some ways, most of the BRIC countries individually are building a new format of engagement with the United States of America. Whether it is Brazil, whether it is South Africa, whether it is India, whether it is China, whether it is Russia, there is a constant dynamic relationship that is in place between those two countries. And BRICS as a collective have an opportunity to engage with the Americans, to engage with the EU, to engage with other partners at the G20 and many other fora where we negotiate common rules and common approaches for solving global economic challenges, such as at the G20, and of course at different international fora where BRICS come together and come up with joint statements or collective positions. So I think there's an opportunity that exists in the international system that allows us to come together and respond to either individual countries or other groups and try and work with them for the common betterment. But because I have used this term new hegemony and individual identities, I think we must also realize that BRICS also has to deal with the fact that there is now the largest economy in the world, which is not US. We will also, as BRICS, have to negotiate with that largest economy. Their agenda, which is China, is not the BRICS agenda. The BRICS agenda and the Chinese agenda is also different. So as a group, we will have to be flexible enough to deal with individual countries and yet find common ground to work together as a collective. So I think the way I see it, we as a group have to ensure that between the two largest powers in the world, we ensure a stable world order. And our challenge, therefore, Professor Tolaraya, is to look both towards the East and towards the West to ensure that we can find middle ground for us to be stable and prosperous.
Thank you. Well, Russia is looking both East and West, but, well, not always with a friendly eye. But I hope that your dream will come true and we will find enough space for cooperation in existing international formats to engage the United States. So wish you best. Thanks.
Дмитрий Савкин, директор Байкальского института БРИКС. У меня вопрос к Вячеславу Алексеевичу. Я его сформулирую на английском языке, поскольку он важный, чтобы наши коллеги за рубежом его поняли. Distinguished Dr. Nikonov, you very precisely formulated the synergetic effect of the potential cooperation between the BRICS countries in vaccination from the COVID-19. And how do you estimate the potential of the BRICS countries in their cooperation in establishing the global infrastructure of 5G networks as the blood vessels of global digital economy? Thank you so much.
As I've got the question, should we create an alternative internet? It's a good question. Why not? Actually, the cyber sovereignty is something which is important because at this point, internet is something located in the United States, and they just can switch it off at any moment. And this is a challenge, since much in lives of our countries depend on the internet, and we're vulnerable. We feel it in our country especially, which is under many attacks, real attacks, I mean, from the United States, not the alleged attacks of Russian hackers on the US election. We understand that. And actually in Russia, we do work on the situation when Americans do switch the internet, switch off the internet. What shall we do? So we are, we actually, in the Duma, we passed a law which would enable the Russian authorities to do this job. We fund this job so as to make internet functioning from maybe different places, not just the United States. As for BRICS, it can be a joint effort. I don't know what would be the result and the outcome, how it will actually work. But the idea is quite ambitious, and I think it's in the interest of the whole world to be less dependent on the United States. Even it took some time for the United States to realize that monopolization of the internet is a bad thing. As we now know, the courts are suing Google, which controls 90% of the American search systems, which is a real monopoly. In Russia, we managed to handle with Google, which also tried to monopolize the Russian market, but now we have Yandex, which is comparable or even bigger in Russia than Google, of course. But this is one of the ways to deal with the situation. But the basic thing is to have the, the servers of the internet and the initial addresses, not just there over the ocean, but maybe somewhere closer, maybe in many centers. Why not BRIC countries?
Vladimir.
Vladimir.
It's great to see so many friends in this room and in the virtual room just on the screen here, and it's really unfortunate that we could not share our BRICSology, new drinks, with some of our friends who are not with us physically today, but I'm sure you're all with us. And as some in this audience already, I have been thinking of that first academic forum, which seemed to be just like yesterday, but it was already 12 years ago, in a very cold day in December, as some of us clearly remember, here in Moscow. And the most important thing for that meeting, which actually was only 4 letters, that was only BRIC at that time, that was combination of very clear understanding of our common interests, not to be against, but to be in favor, and also vision and strategy. And if I would go even further, creativity. This is how BRICS has been built, and this is why I'm sure BRICS will have a very bright future if we continue to combine that understanding of common interests with creativity and strategy. In that context, I have 2 suggestions for our next plenary sessions and for our panel discussions of this academic forum. The first one relates to a correlation of 2 elements of the BRICS architecture. One being peace and security pillar, and the other is new technology pillar. Clearly, they have been coming more and more combined, particularly compared to 12 years ago when BRICS was conceived. In that context, just let us look at some specific issues. The first specific issue of combo of peace security on the one hand and new tech on the other are the issues of cyber and terrorism. We have been discussing at the BRICS Forum quite a lot and very productively threats of terrorism with use of weapons of mass destruction, WMD terrorism, and I'm glad that it has been consistently in the final documents, both of our academic meetings, but also of the BRICS summits. This is good, this is non-controversial, and still should be very high on the agenda. But let us just imagine when in these very nervous times of the pandemic, if the terrorists would have attempted to disrupt global communications. Basically, we can just imagine it right now. If it happened, we probably would have no discussion like we have now. And you can go on and go on, including here the educational process, people-to-people contacts, which are more and more virtual, and so on. So the problem with the pandemic would be multiplied with the mass panic in different corners of the world. Basically, this unfortunately will be bad globalization, which may come back in its worst way. So combining our joint effort in preventing WMD terrorism and cyber terrorism should, in my view, be high on the agenda, because while we prioritize, unfortunately, the bad guys prioritize as well. And unfortunately, they are also very smart. Of course, more investment should be done, as our Chinese colleague rightly indicated, to looking at the AI, artificial intelligence, both as a challenge, sometimes as a threat, but even more so as an opportunity. I think Dr. Panova rightly mentioned that if we only are fixed at the challenges and do not see how we use a crisis to turn this into opportunity, this would be both scaring ourselves but also wasting of our time. And last but not least, Minister Fredkov mentioned the energy agenda, and we do have it in our discussions consistently. But there is obviously something which has been uniting all the BRICS since BRIC and later on BRICS was conceived. This is development of nuclear energy and nuclear energy projects. So far, we have been looking more on the bilaterals here. Perhaps time has come, surely time has come for looking at more multilateral approaches in the nuclear energy area. And the final comment, which is slightly separate from this combo of peace, security, and tech, which goes broader and which comes to my initial point that we need to combine our common interests of the five with our vision and creativity. And here, in my view, academic forum may be even more thought-provocative than some other structures, particularly the summits themselves, which have, well, the necessary level of consensus, which sometimes helps, but sometimes may prevent from thought-provoking ideas. Whether time has come or not to think about adding one more letter to BRICS, the sixth letter to BRICS. Let me leave it as a question mark here rather than a statement. And I know all the points why it is premature to discuss that. I read all the official stuff on that. But let us just look out of the box here. Not necessarily for this November, maybe even not necessarily for the year 2021, but slightly beyond. And then we clearly will see that that structure, not organization, but a club, if you like, would develop successfully if it re-energizes itself with new memberships which will be beneficial for all of us. My institute, Peer Center, has just completed a big study on the sixth letter of BRICS, which is exactly called like that. In Russian, it is шестая буква BRICS with a question mark. And of course, we looked at all the cases of those states which have already expressed their own interest. Not that we want them, they do not want us, but those who have expressed their interest in this or that fashion to be with us as the sixth member of our club, of our structure. And actually, there are some positive findings here. I will not take time on that. I will leave that question mark for future discussions. But one of the ideas which is clearly looking into the future, that Indonesia may be clearly on that list. Some would say Argentina, for this or that reason, should be clearly on that list. Some would name Egypt, and you can continue that list. But whether it should be BRICS, or it should be BARCIC, or it should be BRICS, I suggest that we do not only repeat as mantra the fact that we need to stop here, digest what we have. Yes, we should. But let us be creative to look into the future and even further expand our successes. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. In fact, your comment and question comes in line with there, because we have a number of questions coming from YouTube. This came that to all the speakers, in fact, that don't you think that pandemia could be the opportunity to advance with the BRICS Plus? So it's not more about the extra word, but about also BRICS Plus initiative. I would name two more questions now, and then we'll give the floor to the speakers. Another one came from Juan Lei to Ivan. If you could share with us your opinions as for the current Brazilian government's pursuit of a membership in the OECD and the strategic partner with the US. Is it contradictory with Brazil's commitment to BRICS family? And another one from Jean Ting is about mentioning what are the bottlenecks for BRICS people-to-people exchange. So if you could all elaborate on that. And I would now pass the floor to our speakers.
Well, we've been discussing it from the very beginning. It's not a new question. Broadening, deepening, it's something which every organization faces. I agree that we should not be in a hurry, first place. Actually, the idea was to have the continental leaders. There are not so many. Of course, Indonesia may be interested, but yesterday this question was raised at the Valdai Forum, and there was a speaker from Indonesia who said that we are more interested in cooperating with Turkey, South Korea, Egypt, and the other countries have already formed some group which is meeting, and they're happy with that. So I don't think there is universal thrust in Indonesia to join. Actually, I would agree with Samir in a sense that we should be looking for a new mission, broader mission. We should take into account more challenges which are facing BRICS. Because while you're expanding any organization, you make it more vague. That is sure. If you want decisions, if you want serious leadership, you cannot expand unlimitedly. So at this point, I'm not the fan of the idea of broadening. I'm still the fan of the idea of deepening the cooperation. And I've always been a champion of bureaucracy. I believe in bureaucracies. I do believe, because when a bureaucracy exists, they have their vested interest in expanding their mission. And we need bigger BRICS bureaucracy in order to succeed. Because then bureaucracy starts to work for its purpose, and if their purpose is to deepen BRICS, they'll do it. So I am for bureaucratization of BRICS rather than for expansion.
Excuse me. You mean we need to make a secretariat of BRICS?
Well, as a minimum, for sure.
Okay, something to explore for our track one and to listen to academia. Thank you. Ivan?
Yes, thanks for the question. That's an interesting one, because in fact, I think it goes back to what Brazil is and how we are positioned in the world. Has not really to do with one government or another, but it has to do with how we, in fact, what is the tradition of international relations and foreign policy in this country. Well, we've seen, for example, a very productive Brazilian BRICS presidency last year, and quite, I'd say, quite pragmatic on what could be delivered and stressing issues that were, for example, quite well taken by us in the academic forum and in the BTTC meeting, where we could discuss, for example, trade, agriculture, energy, science and technology cooperation, and having quite a clear view that Brazil wanted to deliver practical solutions for BRICS challenges, specifically on economic cooperation issues. So governments changed, and we've been dealing with the BRICS from my institution, at least from 2010. But what we've seen is that we continue to have BRICS as a very important part of the Brazilian foreign agenda. Apart from that, and taking the OECD question into account, again, I think the OECD agenda for Brazil is very important, and that, in my opinion, doesn't really take us from BRICS and what we can achieve with the BRICS. And it is very important because obviously many developing countries do face similar challenges. And if we do remember our recent history, we've seen that Russia, China, Indonesia, and many others were countries that until very 2 or 3, 5 years ago were also keen to engage with OECD discussions. And the point for Brazil, again, going back to how I see it, is that we're in a process of reforming the way the Brazilian state delivers to the Brazilian citizens. So we are reviewing the way we do public policy in this country, in trying to get to a more transparent and evidence-based approach. And in that way, that's how we've seen in Brazil the debate on the OECD accession. That is a way to modernize how the government delivers to the citizens. So it's less related up to now, although we do see some connections with our foreign policy here, but it's a lot more less related to foreign policy issues, and it is a lot more connected to the need to modernize public policies in Brazil, and we're seeing that as an opportunity to push that forward. So let's say OECD brings us a lot more to a domestic agenda than an international one. And having in mind the universal and quite pragmatic approach that Brazil has traditionally taken in foreign policy up to now, we do see there's plenty of space for Brazil to be a member of OECD and also be an active participant of the BRICS. And taking just a quick take on the idea of expanding the BRICS or not, I think maybe we should start with the bank. Maybe a good idea with the idea of getting more countries involved in maybe broadening the NDB membership be better and less of a problem when it comes. In fact, it would be, I think, a good way forward in order to strengthen the NDB. So that we could start to build a little bit more in the financial world, having the NDB as the center, a new circle, a new institution that would bring about more changes that would go further beyond our countries. But for the BRICS as the political grouping, I'm not sure if that's the case of expansion right now. But I'd be happy to see NDB broaden the membership and start maybe to be a good point to see who and how is willing to really come with us and deliver with us in this specific cooperation scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. We're about to finish now. So are there any wishes from the speakers to make like 30-second concluding remarks?
Victoria, I will just quickly take 5 seconds and say I agree with Professor Nikonov and I agree with Ivan. Our expansion should happen through the bank, and our deepening of the relationship should be our first priority. We should not assume that we are on calm seas. We are in choppy waters. It's time to look inside and strengthen what we have and expand through the institution that we have built, the New Development Bank.
Thank you so much. We have South Africa, China.
Well, I think that was a fascinating discussion, though, of course, I miss seeing the eyes of my friends. Screen does not help communication, for sure. I think it was more interesting to sit at one table and discuss, but as a substitute, it was also great. I think so. So I thank all the speakers for their great effort, for what they said and did. Samir raised, I think, a very interesting question of a positive superpower. I'm going to think of an example of a very positive superpower. Maybe, of course, Soviet Union was, I don't know. Maybe India when it was superpower. I'm not sure whether it ever was a superpower. It was too fragmented at any time of history to be a superpower, though it was one of the biggest economies for centuries. I cannot think of America as a positive superpower, but I think what we should strive for, we should become superpowers and be very positive. Even being nationalist does not, I think, preclude us from being constructive in our relationship and pursuing our national interests and common goals. And we have quite a few common goals to follow. So, again, welcome to the discussion, and of course, I'm looking forward to great conference. And see you later. Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. And this is indeed a great closure to our today's first opening day. We could see that, in fact, we could have continued, but unfortunately we have to withdraw now. We will be missing you at our coffee breaks and reception, but we're looking forward to further interaction and to next year in India, but this will come later. So see you tomorrow. Thank you again for a really enlightening discussion, and we're looking forward to more ideas to come during the next 2 days of the forum. Thank you, everybody.